Jim Hall defied many odds and he broke a few laws. One such law was the law of diminishing returns. As explained to me, the law of diminishing returns goes something like this. You were out late the night before and walked into the office with a terrible hangover. Somebody has brought in a box of chocolate donuts to share, and they look really good. You know you shouldn't take one, but you do, and that first bite is awesome. For a moment, the headache is gone, and you make short work of the rest of the donut. The headache returns, and there's more donuts in the box. So weighing the risks versus the benefits, you disregard the calories and devour a second donut, expecting an equal or even better outcome than the first, except it's not. In fact, according to the law of diminishing returns, you cannot replicate that first euphoric feeling. But being with Jim Hall defied that law. The more you were with him, the longer you wanted to spend time with him. Even after a 4-hour round of golf, you wanted to sit with him on the patio and talk about certain shots you made, certain putts you missed. Or talk about family, or talk about friends. Even after that, you want the day to continue with dinner, sitting on the back patio, having a few drinks, just hanging out with him. But time with Jim didn't drag on. It got better because of the way he made you feel. He was welcoming and present. He cared about what you said, and he just made you feel good. My name is Mike McInerney, and I'm a crier. Along with my cousins, my grandmother used to say that our bladders are too close to our eyes. I'm Jim's cousin, and he was my very best friend. And I know that many of you here today can say the same thing about him. And any one of you could be standing right here where I am now, sharing your memories about him. And I feel very fortunate to be the one Jennifer asked to do this, but I felt otherwise at first. I was in Chicago on Friday when my phone rang. It was a call from Jim Hall. And for a split second I thought, but then I thought otherwise. It was Jennifer, of course. It was good to hear her voice. She had had a long day, as you can imagine. And she said, "We want you to do the eulogy." And I froze up a little bit. Fear gripped me, not because I don't like public speaking. You'll soon realize that is not the case. I froze up a little bit because of the way I thought I could possibly not get through this. But also, I thought, why me? And what about Kevin Flynn, Peter Kowalski, Jimmy Brennan, Tim McCaffrey, his brothers and sisters, why me? Then I figured they were asked and already said no, so I accepted. I read a very comforting article over the weekend about eulogies, which is no coincidence. It was part of the assignment. And it said, "It may hurt to write it, and reading it, for some that's the worst part. The world might spin a little, and everything familiar to you might fade for a few minutes. But remember, remind yourself as you stand there, you're the lucky one. You were selected. You get to stand, face the group, the family, the world, and add it up. You're being asked to do something at the very moment when nothing can be done. You get the last word in the attempt to define the outlines of a life. And that's a gift. So Jennifer, thank you. For giving me this precious opportunity when there were so many of Jim's friends who could have been standing here instead of me. And I will try my very best to share the essence of Jim with you here. In one word, he was transparent. Whether you knew him for 20 minutes or 20 years, you were going to get pretty much a clear idea of what kind of person he was, and that person didn't change. I can tell you he was the same guy in February of 2017 that he was in February of 1977. He was funny, athletic, friendly, inclusive, mischievous, loyal, competitive, charming, goofy, determined. He was constantly looking to improve himself, whether it was transferring from West Bloomfield to Brother Rice, sorry Peter, or listening to instructional tapes while driving back and forth to Midland and Gaylord. He just wanted to be the best at what he did, and he succeeded. He was a master salesman, one who would beg you to sell him something. He broke into the car business by starting at the bottom and working his way to the top to be a dealer. When we were young, my brother Jack, Jim, and I were part of an elite painting crew that specialized in painting car dealerships. In fact, we were so selective that we only painted one. And even on that one, we only painted the curbs and the outside walls. It took us all summer. We didn't use fancy high-tech painting machines. We painted by hand. My Uncle Hoot said for what he paid us to paint Oakland Dodge that summer, he could have hired Michelangelo. I mentioned that he broke a few rules and was a bit mischievous once as a young employee at Kroger. He was a bottle return guy, and that was before they had the machines that spit out the receipts. And I believe Kevin and Peter and McCaff showed up with a small bag of 10 or 15 cans, and somehow the receipt came out to be 100 or 1,000. He would later argue that his math was simply substandard. And when he launched a cigar from the upper deck of the Silver Dome during the Lions game, he said that he was simply curious to know whether or not cigars could flow. In both cases, the authorities believed otherwise. He hated long socks. If you ever saw him in a suit, you'd notice the short golf socks across his legs. He loved the Pittsburgh Steelers of the 70s and likened himself to Lynn Swan when we played snow football. I can't tell you how many times we played snow football and pickup basketball games over the years when we were younger. He hated mayonnaise. And he loved to nap, and he was good at it. In fact, when I saw him yesterday, I thought, well, that looks familiar. He impacted people in every community that he lived in. Pelican Bay, the Fenton area with Hall, Chrysler, Warwick, Grand Blanc neighborhoods, Holy Family and Powers Catholic families, Midland, Gaylord, the Schaumburg years. Quick story about how he would make friends visiting him this past holiday season. Down in Pelican Bay at his condominium, it would take about 2 miles to drive from his condo to a parking area where you'd take a long golf cart through a path to the beach. And we were waiting for the golf cart to show up, and Jim was 3 or 4 feet away, having a deep conversation with a 75-year-old golf cart driver. And they left as best friends 2 minutes later. Jim was retired. He wasn't going to sell the guy a car. He was just that kind of a guy. Here today, you've got Chrysler executives, you've got car dealers from around the country, you've got salespeople, you've got guys who worked in the back. It didn't matter to Jim. One of his employees I saw on Facebook, Tommy Harthausen, said that Jim was a man who gave me a chance, a great boss, teacher, mentor. Even his ad agency said Jim Hall was our friend first and our client second. At Warwick Hills, he met families through his daughter's activities. He met people sitting next to him in the locker room, golfers he caught up with and played with on Facebook again. Eric Perkins said, I met Jim when he asked why I was golfing by myself, and then he invited me to spend the afternoon with him. Vintage Jim Hall. Even the people in the pro shop he supported, staff, he knew their names as well as they knew his. The community from Michigan State, however, was a special one to him. With Ashley at MSU, Jim had an additional excuse to relive his college days. Football tailgate parties became a venue where Jim could see Ashley, meet her friends, meet new people who were just parked next to him, share his love for MSU with Powers families, meet up with customers he had sold cars to, who might have expressed a common interest in MSU, and a place to reconvene the old Lamb Mackay crew. Nobody relived the glory days of Lamb Mackay like Jim Hall. He had an absolute blast at Michigan State as a student, and more so as a member of that fraternity. If he could make quick friends of customers and random strangers, imagine the impact he had on a group of guys who lived with him in college. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that Jim was the king of Michigan State those few years on campus. In most fraternities, there's a social chairman. Pat Lynch said that Jim was our social chairman. Sam Meehan said he was the straw that stirred the drink. I think he called it a swizzle stick, actually. This past fall, Jim and Jimmy Brennan planned an incredible weekend. Not one where a group had an exotic excursion with millions of tourist stops and a full agenda that cost thousands of dollars, but a simple get-together with his closest friends from Lamb Mackay and their wives. The guys played golf at Jimmy's club while the girls went shopping. Afterwards, we hung around Jimmy's beautiful home and took a boat ride on his lake. That night, we had dinner in Grand Rapids, and the following day, we all headed to East Lansing for a tailgate. The common theme of that weekend was how we needed to keep doing things like that. We were negligent if we allowed too much time to pass before we got together again and again. Times like these were not only of utmost importance to Jim, but they were his new mission. He followed that couple's weekend with the guys' golf trip to Pebble Beach. He didn't waste any time crossing things off his bucket list once he retired. This time he treated mostly childhood friends from Our Lady of Refuge and Brother Rice with a spectacular golf experience, which he documented in a picture book that he surprised everybody with. This was a chance for Jim to give back to those who had given him so much over the years. My memories with Jim go way back. Our mothers are sisters, and I can recall 12 kids running around the Hall compound like a bunch of maniacs when we could go visit them. Back then, their house was in an area that had some undeveloped woods and farm areas, which were kind of a playground for Tommy, Danny, Jimmy, Jack, and I. Danny reminded me recently of a small fire that was started by a cigarette and some dry leaves, and how we used alternate resources to extinguish the flame. I think one of the great fears any mother could imagine is a sleepover of 7 boys between the ages of 6 and 16, which is why we only had a couple back then, but they were memorable. One thing Jim introduced me to was the midnight snack. This renegade activity, I think, was less about being hungry at midnight and more about doing something you just weren't supposed to do. Sainthood, Aunt Lou awaits you. I'd like to simultaneously clear up and continue the conversation about a nickname some of you may have seen on Facebook that his friends called Jim. He had 6 siblings, And like our entire family, the names were pretty vanilla. Jim, Tom, Jack, Dan, Pat, Tom, Jim, Jack. Over and over again. It could be for this reason that the Hall boys decided to rename themselves. And not with cool street names like Jay-Z and Ice Cube. These names were more of a druid for Middle Earth, Little Spring. Tommy was Amu, Danny was Anu, Jim was Tut, Au, it went on and on. The argument of late has been the correct spelling of the name Tut. It had no spell correct on the computer here. And even Jim would spell it in varying ways when he'd sign off on an email. So I guess it remains open for interpretation. I remember when Jim and Jennifer met and Jim's sudden change in demeanor. He talked a little faster, jumped a little higher, and smiled considerably wider. If you have not had a chance to see pictures of them on Facebook or the funeral home, I'll tell you they were essentially one person, symbiote. Like Brangelina. Jim and Jen. Jennifer, you were Jim's best friend, his right hand, his confidant, partner. Crutch, his +2, his co-laugher, his audience. His biggest fan, his designated driver at times. Cheerleader, his mate, and his sweetheart. Testament to his love for you is that which you didn't hear when you were around. I think I speak for all of his friends and acquaintances when I say that he always referenced you, Jen this and Jen that, and I'll check with Jen. Jen would like to do that. Let's include the girls. He needed you. You were always there. And as Jim became whimsical and buoyant after he met and married Jennifer, he recalibrated, refocused, and zeroed in when Lindsay was born. Ashley and Lauren rounded out Jim's beautiful family. His pride in them, in you, is eternal. Jim and I were golfing last fall and afterwards drove over to watch Lauren's match. She was playing for Flint Powers. He teased you a little, coached you a little, but made you laugh a lot. In fact, we ended up driving the whole foursome back to the clubhouse on our cart, 6 of us with 4 golf bags. Jim was making everybody laugh. That was your dad at his happiest. Last Monday, as Jim lay in a hospital bed breathing with the assistance of a respirator, we all prayed for a miracle. I personally prayed a novena, asking God to bless us with just a few more years. As the week went on, it became apparent that he would not recover. And I thought, maybe we were actually granted miracles many times. A few years ago, Jim had a life-threatening blood clot and was administered his last rites. 22 years ago, he underwent a life-threatening operation to receive a kidney transplant. And 51 years ago, as Danny said, as he slept in a crib, as a fire consumed the family's home next to his closet in his bedroom. So maybe this time God decided. Maybe this time God decided he wanted some time with this tall man. And we are left with 52 years, unforgettable memories, hundreds of close friends, and 3 precious girls. We can all carry on this example, big laughs, big hugs, and getting together as often as possible in his name. I'd like to conclude with a short, sweet Irish song to say farewell to our buddy. Hold your tears to the end for too long. You'll find why. One might be because I'm not a good singer. sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts I leave behind. They would wish me one more day to stay. And since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I will gently rise and I'll softly call, fare thee well and joy be with